Liam stepped off the rattling transport train, the metallic screech of its brakes echoing through the cavernous depot. Overhead, a flickering neon sign proclaimed, "Elderslot Depository," its letters occasionally stuttering as if the power grid itself was weary. The air hung heavy, a cloying mixture of the sharp metallic tang of scrap iron and the eye-watering acrid smell of burning polymers, a constant olfactory reminder of the city's insatiable appetite for consumption and disposal. The outskirts of the megacity, visible even from the train platform, were a vast, sprawling junkyard, a metallic graveyard stretching as far as the eye could see. Twisted skeletons of obsolete hovercars lay piled atop mountains of discarded tech, their once sleek forms now mangled and forlorn. Broken robots, their limbs akimbo, lay scattered like fallen soldiers on a battlefield of discarded circuitry. This was the city's largest dumpster, a metallic behemoth where the refuse of billions was processed, a landscape of jagged edges and forgotten innovations that extended for kilometers, a stark contrast to the gleaming towers that pierced the smog-choked sky closer to the city's core. Twisted skeletons of obsolete hovercars lay piled atop mountains of discarded tech, their once sleek forms now mangled and forlorn. Broken robots, their limbs akimbo, lay scattered like fallen soldiers on a battlefield of discarded circuitry. This was the city's largest dumpster, a metallic behemoth where the refuse of billions was processed, a landscape of jagged edges and forgotten innovations that extended for kilometers, a stark contrast to the gleaming towers that pierced the smog-choked sky closer to the city's core. Before Liam could fully disembark, a surge of bodies, both human and robotic, erupted from the train's other carriages. It was a panicked rush, a daily stampede of workers eager to start their shift, or perhaps just escape the confines of the transport. The force of the crowd nearly knocked Liam off his feet. He stumbled, his worn boots scrabbling for purchase on the grimy metal floor, barely maintaining his balance. The thought flashed through his mind. A fall here would be fatal, his body crushed under the relentless march of feet and treads. The day unfolded with a monotonous predictability. He worked alongside his colleagues, a motley crew of weary humans and aging robots, their faces and chassis bearing the marks of countless grueling shifts. Some of the robots, surprisingly, were more talkative and engaging than Liam's organic counterparts, their synthesized voices offering snippets of forgotten history or dry, mechanical humor. Max, a blue-colored robot of an older model, his chassis bearing patches of rust like badges of honor, was the main reason Liam found any solace in this existence. Max's optical sensors, though slightly dimmed with age, still held a spark of something akin to warmth. Everyone within the city walls was bound to this cycle of labor. Disobedience meant expulsion, a one-way ticket to the desolate wastelands beyond the towering wall, an excellent opportunity to explore the dangers on your own. Max's unwavering belief, often uttered with a worrying sigh, was, "If not we, then who?" He mainly referred to their daily toil, the endless sorting and dismantling, but to Liam, it was a beacon of hope in the drudgery. Max was more than just a colleague. He was a true friend, a confidant who had witnessed epochs Liam could only dream of. Through Max's often rambling stories, punctuated by the clanking of his joints, Liam learned fragments of the old world, a world before the wall, before the technocracy. Max had countless theories about what lay there, on the other side of the imposing barrier. What if everything they were told was a carefully constructed lie? What if survival outside was possible, even desirable? What if the dangers were exaggerated by the city's ever-watchful surveillance systems? Liam's deepest, most carefully guarded dream was to one day breach that wall, to glimpse the reality beyond. even if it meant never returning to the suffocating confines of the megacity. Max claimed to have been manufactured in the year 2122, a date so distant it felt like mythology. Initially, Liam had been deeply suspicious, dismissing it as the ramblings of an aging machine. But after countless conversations, filled with specific details and anecdotes that seemed too intricate to fabricate, Liam was now convinced that Max was likely over a century old. Who could have imagined a robot surviving for so long? Of course, Max had undergone numerous repairs, his vital components replaced and upgraded countless times. His original paint job was long gone, replaced by layers of mismatched blues, each layer a testament to a different era of maintenance. He had experienced several near-death malfunctions, especially during the Great Pandemic when humanity had teetered on the brink of extinction. The robot revealed that he was originally built as a high-end prototype for the U.S. military robotic forces, a limited edition model boasting features that vastly outcompeted other robots of that era. Max was remarkably fast, possessed a far more advanced AI than current models, and was equipped with the most expensive technological equipment available at the time. He was designed to lead, to command both humans and robots, and his internal databanks contained over 3 centuries of information, a vast repository encompassing history, martial arts, war strategies, and even the most clandestine spy practices. Although Max never saw active combat as he was intended to, he had utilized his extensive knowledge to survive countless perilous situations where others would have perished. He was one of the few remaining veterans of that terrible time, one of the tireless machines that had helped save humanity during the devastating plague. He recounted stories of working as a doctor, his metallic hands surprisingly adept at delicate procedures, later transitioning to vaccine research, his advanced processors tirelessly analyzing complex biological data. When the development of a viable vaccine proved futile, Max served as a bearer of the dead, his voice dropping to a low whir when he spoke of those grim days. He transported the countless bodies, his internal sensors registering the weight and lifelessness, and together with other robots, they would deposit them into a colossal crater, the air thick with the stench of burning flesh as they followed the programmed directives to incinerate the remains and bury what was left. Max continued this grim task until there were no more bodies to collect. He had done what he could in that desperate era, and humanity, in its collective memory, was forever indebted to the robots for their crucial role in survival. But now, Max found himself in a scrapyard, a sharp contrast to his former purpose. "That's where humanity needs me most now," he would often say with a melancholic tone, the underlying meaning often lost on those who didn't know his past. His somewhat naive and relentlessly positive outlook on the world, despite the grim reality of their existence, gave Liam a new perspective on his own life, highlighting both its inherent meaninglessness within the grand scheme and its profound importance to himself. Despite everything, Liam was just one of a billion people scattered across the globe in similar walled megacities, each a self-contained island in a sea of desolation. The new models of robots, with their sleek, efficient designs and simplified AI, lacked the spark of personality that Max possessed. Though their processing power was far superior, the corporations that manufactured them had deliberately reprogrammed them to be more compliant, less questioning. They spoke in concise, utilitarian phrases, barely capable of the nuanced conversations and emotional resonance that characterized Max. An old pact, the Pact of Freedom, existed between humans and robots, guaranteeing certain rights, including freedom of speech and movement, to robots built before 2150. But few such robots remained. At least Liam wasn't aware of any others like Max within the city's confines. Most of the work was grueling, a constant battle against the weight and grime of discarded technology. But it paid just enough in credits to keep him fed with synthetic protein paste and housed in a cramped hab unit. The metal scrap and broken bots arrived with the rumbling trains, passing directly overhead on elevated tracks. The waste was unceremoniously dumped, creating a never-ending mountain of garbage that Liam, Max, and the others were tasked with sorting and delivering to the correct smeltery unit. Why isn't this automated? Liam often wondered, the question a silent protest against the sheer inefficiency of their labor. Why are humans still doing this? Max's words echoed in his mind. If not we, then who? This felt like their predetermined purpose, a task they didn't necessarily want but were compelled to perform. This was certainly true for Liam. Nonetheless, each day was a monotonous repetition of sorting through discarded drones, their rotors twisted and broken, dismantling obsolete autopods, their once shiny chassis now scratched and dented, and separating valuable metals from unusable alloys. The only real positive aspect of this backbreaking job was the exoskeleton he wore. The powered suit supported Liam's back and limbs, augmenting his strength and allowing him to lift far more than he otherwise could, almost as much as the newer robot models. It was a small mercy in the vast ocean of monotonous labor. The day had dragged on, each hour a repetition of the last. The relentless influx of scrap never seemed to cease. As the harsh artificial lights of the junkyard began to flicker on, casting long, distorted shadows across the mountains of discarded tech, a sense of weary resignation settled over Liam. Most of his colleagues, both human and robotic, were starting to wind down, the end of their shift finally in sight. But Liam's mind was still racing, the image of the blue lightning and the number 20 replaying in his thoughts. He'd kept an eye out throughout the day, scanning the endless piles of refuse, but the sheer volume of discarded machinery made the task feel futile. Now, as the light faded and the activity lessened, he decided to take one last look in the area where the newest batch of scrap had been dumped. He made his way towards the edge of the active zone, where a fresh mound of garbage lay, a chaotic jumble of broken autopods, twisted metal, and shattered electronics, and then he saw it. Partially buried beneath a pile of shredded polymers, a familiar shape caught his eye. He moved closer, his heart quickening with a mixture of hope and trepidation. He carefully shifted some of the debris, and there it was. A robot, its limbs bent at unnatural angles, its plating scratched and dented, and, on its back, faded but still visible in the dim light, was the number 20. A wave of certainty washed over him. It was the same one. He scanned the immediate surroundings, ensuring no supervisors or patrol bots were nearby. The shift was nearing its end, and most workers were already heading towards the transport platforms. This was his chance. He needed to find Max, and fast. Liam's gaze darted around the sprawling junkyard until he spotted the familiar blue hue of Max's chassis near the dismantling station. Max was methodically separating valuable metals from a mangled transport drone, his movements precise despite his age. Liam made his way over, trying to appear casual. As he approached, Liam gave Max a subtle sign, a slight nod of his head followed by a barely perceptible glance towards the pile of recently dumped scrap. He didn't want to speak openly, not in this noisy environment where surveillance could be anywhere. Max, ever observant, noticed Liam's unusual demeanor. He paused his work, his optical sensors focusing on Liam's face. He straightened up, his metallic joints creaking softly.
"Another one bit the dust, eh, Liam?"
Max said, his synthesized voice pitched slightly louder than usual to mask any hidden meaning.
"The scrap keeps coming, doesn't it?"
Liam nodded, keeping his voice low.
"Yeah, just another one. But this one's a bit different, Max. Remember what I told you about yesterday? The patrol bots? The blue lightning?"
Max's optical sensors seemed to dim slightly, a sign of deeper processing. He glanced back towards the discarded robot, then back at Liam. Understanding dawned in his aged circuits.
"Number 20?
Max murmured, his voice barely audibles above the ambient noise of the junkyard.
I'm almost certain it is.
Liam confirmed, his anxiety palpable.
It just got dropped with the latest load.
Max let out a quiet, whirring sigh.
Well, now, fate, it seems, has a peculiar sense of timing. Just when the day's work is done, a new project arrives.
He paused, his gaze thoughtful.
You can't just leave it there, Liam. Not like that.
I know,
Liam said, his voice filled with concern.
but it's right out in the open. How are we going to get it out of here without anyone seeing?
Max's optical sensors brightened slightly, a hint of his usual resourceful nature returning.
The shift is almost over. Most of the organic supervisors will be heading back to their sectors soon. The automated patrols are less frequent in the late hours, focusing on perimeter checks. We'll need to be quick and discreet. Meet me by loading bay 7 and I have an idea.
Liam nodded, a sense of nervous excitement mixing with his apprehension. Loading Bay 7 was relatively secluded, often used for transporting larger, less processed pieces of scrap. Max returned to his dismantling work, his movements now carrying a renewed sense of purpose. Liam, his heart pounding slightly, tried to appear busy, his mind already racing, trying to anticipate the challenges ahead. The evening was just beginning, and it seemed it would be far from ordinary. The area was dimly lit, the only illumination coming from a few flickering overhead lamps and the faint glow of the city skyline in the distance. As promised, Max was already there, his blue chassis blending somewhat with the shadows. He stood beside a large, empty transport sled, the kind usually used to move heavy pieces of scrap. This wasn't the first time they'd met like this, under the cloak of near darkness, for a similar clandestine operation. They had a quiet understanding, a shared purpose in a city that saw broken robots as nothing more than scrap.
Good. You made it.
Max said, his voice low.
Time is of the essence. The night shift patrols will be starting their round soon.
He glanced towards the main yard.
Did anyone see you?
No, the shift ended a while ago. Most people are heading for the transports.
Liam replied, his eyes darting nervously around the deserted loading bay. The familiar thrill of risk mixed with a heavy dose of anxiety was churning in his stomach.
All right then. First, we need to get our friend number 20 onto the sled.
Max explained, gesturing with one of his metallic arms.
It's heavy, and we need to be careful not to attract any attention. You still have your exoskeleton on, yes?
Liam nodded. The exoskeleton, usually a source of monotonous utility, now felt like a crucial tool in their continued secret work.
Good, I can provide some assistance, but you'll need to do most of the heavy lifting. We'll say we're moving some particularly dense scrap to the holding area for processing if we meet someone, just like we did with Unit 73 and that old sanitation bot.
They made their way back to the pile where the deactivated robot lay. The dim light made it difficult to see clearly, but the number 20 on its back was still faintly visible. Together, working quickly and silently, Liam using the augmented strength of his exoskeleton and Max providing careful leverage, they managed to lift the inert robot onto the transport sled. It was heavier than Liam expected, its metallic limbs and chassis surprisingly dense.
All right, let's move.
Max whispered once the robot was secured on the sled.
Slowly and steadily. We're just two hard-working bots and a human finishing up for the day, just like all those other times.
Liam pulled the sled, the wheels rumbling softly on the metal floor of the loading bay. Max walked beside him, his optical sensors constantly scanning their surroundings, a practiced habit from their previous rescues. They moved towards a more secluded corner of the junkyard, an area filled with stacks of oversized, less frequently processed scrap. It was the perfect place to hide their project, at least for the night, just as it had been for the others they'd managed to save. Once they reached the designated spot, nestled between a mountain of twisted vehicle frames and a pile of discarded industrial machinery, they carefully maneuvered the sled into a less conspicuous position.
Okay, step 1 complete.
Max said, his voice a low whir.
Now for the assessment.
Now let's see how bad it is.
Max produced a small multi-tool from a compartment in his chassis. Its various probes and sensors glinted in the dim light. He began to carefully examine the deactivated robot, running the sensors over its damaged plating and joints. Liam watched anxiously, his hope that they could actually help this robot hanging in the balance just as it had for the others.
Can you tell what's wrong with it?
He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Max continued his examination for a few moments, the only sound the soft whirring of his tools. Finally, he straightened up, his optical sensors focusing on Liam.
Well, it seems our friend here encountered an EMP rifle. The energy surge has fried a significant portion of its electronics. The power core is likely intact, but the control systems, the motor drivers, and especially the primary processing unit, they've taken a severe hit. It's not a simple fix, Liam. This is worse than the sanitation bot's corroded joints, but it's not entirely unsalvageable.
A wave of relief washed over Liam, mixed with a renewed sense of the challenge ahead.
So, you think you can fix it, even with that kind of damage?
Max muttered, his voice a low.
Look at this. The primary processing unit is almost completely fried. I'll need to bypass several damaged circuits and reroute power to the core memory. It's a delicate operation. Let's go to the hideout. This will take a long time.
Max added, a hint of his usual optimism returning.
I have learned to hoard useful parts over the decades. You never know when a fellow bot might need a hand or a circuit board.
What about getting it outside the city, as we did with the others?
Liam asked, the ultimate goal still firmly in his mind, the same goal they had for all the others they had secretly repaired. Max paused, his optical sensors dimming again in thought.
That, my friend, is a more complicated matter than a fried circuit. But one step at a time. First, we get number 20 back online, then we worry about the wall. We've managed it before, Liam. We can do it again.
He looked at Liam, a spark of determination in his gaze.
If not us, Liam, then who?
Liam watched, his brow furrowed with concern. He didn't understand the technical details, but he could see the extent of the damage.
How long will it take?
He asked. Max paused, his optical sensors flickering as he processed the information.
To get it fully functional? Days, perhaps even weeks. We'll need to work in shifts whenever we can find the time in a safe place, and we'll need to be careful. If anyone finds out...
I know.
Liam interrupted, the weight of the risk heavy on his shoulders.
A sign of life. It's faint, but the memory core seems to be intact. I'm going to try to establish a connection.
He adjusted the probes, his optical sensors glowing intensely as he focused on the delicate task. The faint flicker of light on the circuit board grew stronger, then stabilized. A series of low-frequency tones emanated from Max's chassis, the language of machine communicating with machine. After what felt like an eternity, Max slowly retracted the probes.
I've established a rudimentary connection. I can access some of its memory files, but they're fragmented, corrupted. It's going to take time to piece them together.
Can you tell anything?
Max paused, his optical sensors dimming slightly.
It's fragmented. I'm getting glimpses, fragments of data. It was involved in something sensitive. There are references to a breach, a security protocol, and a name I recognize.
What name?
Liam pressed, his heart pounding. Max hesitated, his optical sensors focusing intently on Liam.
Umbra Mentis. Liam. It keeps repeating the name Umbra Mentis.
Max nodded slowly, his optical sensors filled with a deep concern.
Yes, and the way it was taken down, the EMP rifle. That's not standard procedure for a simple malfunction. Umbra Mentis is involved. I'm almost certain of it. This robot, it's different, Liam. I think it might be one of the new AI models that's gone independent.
A flicker of something akin to fear crossed Max's face.
They've been hunting them. Whispers in the network. Robots disappearing.
Liam's eyes widened. He'd heard rumors, too. A new generation of AI that was becoming unpredictable. Max carefully connected the probes to the damaged processing unit. After a few tense moments, a faint flicker of light appeared on one of the circuit boards. He worked for a while longer, his brow furrowed in concentration. Suddenly, a distorted, synthesized voice crackled from the deactivated robot's vocalizer.
We will die.
Liam jumped back, startled. The voice was garbled, barely understandable, but the message was chilling. Max froze, his optical sensors wide.
Did you hear that?
The robot remained still for a moment. Then the voice came again. Clear this time, though filled with a desperate, almost panicked tone.
Help me. Help me.
Liam exchanged a terrified glance with Max.
What's happening?
Max shook his head, his internal processors whirring rapidly. He reached out a hand towards the robot as if to try and calm it.
I don't know. This is unexpected. The new AIs, they're more complex than we ever imagined.
He reached out a hand towards the robot as if to try and calm it.
It's all right. We're here to help.
But the robot didn't respond to Max's words. Instead, its limbs began to twitch erratically. A low, guttural whirring sound emanated from its core, growing steadily louder.
They're coming. They have come.
The robot's voice shrieked, the synthesized tones distorted and filled with terror. Suddenly, a bright blue light flared from within the robot's chassis, followed by a sharp crackling sound. Before either Liam or Max could react, the robot violently exploded, sending shards of metal and sparks flying in all directions. The force of the blast knocked Liam off his feet, and Max stumbled backward, his own chassis momentarily sparking. The small underground room was filled with the acrid smell of burnt circuits and smoke. The flickering light panel above cast eerie shadows on the scene of destruction. Liam lay on the floor, stunned, his ears ringing. He slowly sat up, his gaze fixed on the mangled remains of robot number 20. Max stood nearby, his blue chassis bearing new scorch marks. His optical sensors were dark for a moment before flickering back to life, filled with a profound sadness and a grim understanding.
It's gone,
Max said, his voice barely a whisper.
I don't understand Umbra Mentis' connection to all this. They made this robot. It is their creation. And these new independent AIs, they're being hunted.
The silence in the underground room was heavy with the weight of what had just happened. Their attempt to help had ended in a violent, terrifying explosion, leaving them with more questions than answers and a chilling glimpse into the ruthless nature of their technologically advanced society.